The rain was falling hard that November evening in Chicago when everything changed forever. The story I'm about to tell you is called Little Girl Sobbed, as Stepfather forced her to beg garbage for dinner, until Millionaire saw and ... And it. We'll show you how sometimes angels come in the most unexpected forms. The streets were dark and cold as 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez stood shivering behind the restaurant on Madison Street. Her stepfather Marcus had pushed her out of their apartment, again telling her she couldn't come back until she found something to eat from the dumpsters. Emma's small hands were shaking not just from the cold, but from the fear that gripped her heart every single day since her mother had died 6 months ago. She remembered how different life used to be when Mama was alive. There was always food on the table and warm hugs before bedtime and stories about princesses who lived in castles made of stars. But now there was only Marcus with his angry voice and his beer bottles and his cruel punishments that made her wish she could disappear into the rain and never come back. Marcus Turner was not always this way, or at least that's what Emma's mother Rebecca had believed when she married him 2 years ago. He had seemed kind at first, bringing flowers and taking them to the park and promising to be the father Emma never had. But after Rebecca got sick with cancer, everything changed. The medical bills piled up and Marcus started drinking more and more. When Rebecca finally passed away, leaving Emma in his care, the mask came off completely. He spent all the insurance money on gambling and alcohol, leaving nothing for food or clothes for Emma. Every night he would send her out to find her own dinner, telling her she was worthless and a burden, and that he wished she had died instead of her mother. The neighbors in their rundown apartment building could hear the yelling, but nobody wanted to get involved. They had their own problems, and Marcus was known for his violent temper when anyone tried to interfere. That particular night was worse than usual because Marcus had lost his job at the warehouse that morning. He had come home drunk and furious, throwing things around the apartment and screaming at Emma that everything was her fault. When she quietly asked if there was anything to eat for dinner, he grabbed her by the arm and dragged her outside into the pouring rain. "You want food? Then go find it yourself, you little parasite," he had snarled, pushing her toward the alley behind the row of restaurants. "Don't come back until you've eaten something, and if you come back empty-handed, you'll sleep outside tonight." Emma knew he meant it because he had done it before, leaving her on the fire escape in the cold while he passed out drunk inside. She walked slowly through the puddles, her torn sneakers soaking through immediately. Her stomach hurt from hunger as she hadn't eaten anything since the free lunch at school the day before. The dumpster behind Antonio's Italian restaurant was her usual spot because sometimes they threw out whole pizzas that were just a day old. As Emma reached for the lid of the dumpster, her small arms barely able to lift it, she started crying. The tears mixed with the rain on her face as she sobbed, thinking about how her mother would be heartbroken to see her like this. "Mama, I'm so hungry and scared," she whispered to the dark sky, hoping somehow her mother could hear her wherever she was. She climbed up on an old milk crate and leaned into the dumpster, trying to see what was inside. The smell was terrible, making her feel sick, but she had learned to ignore it because hunger was worse than disgust. She found a half-eaten sandwich, wrapped in paper, and was about to grab it when she heard footsteps behind her. Terror filled her chest because she thought it might be Marcus coming to hurt her for taking too long. But when she turned around, she saw a man in an expensive suit holding an umbrella and looking at her with the most shocked expression she had ever seen. Jonathan Stewart was a 45-year-old millionaire who owned several successful tech companies in Chicago. He had everything money could buy, including a mansion in the suburbs, 3 luxury cars, and a vacation home in Florida. But despite all his wealth, Jonathan was deeply unhappy. His wife had divorced him 5 years ago, taking their daughter Sarah with her and moving to California. He threw himself into work, trying to fill the emptiness in his heart with business deals and board meetings. That night, he had been leaving a dinner meeting at Antonio's restaurant, walking to his car parked in the back lot when he saw something that stopped him cold. A small girl in ragged clothes was digging through the garbage in the pouring rain, crying as if her heart was breaking. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him because surely no child should be doing such a thing. But as he stepped closer, he could see it was real, and the sight of it made something crack open inside his chest. "Little girl, what are you doing?" Jonathan asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Emma jumped down from the crate and backed away, looking terrified like a wounded animal ready to run. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered through her tears. "My stepfather said I have to find food here or I can't go home." Jonathan felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm, not wanting to scare her more. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, keeping his distance so she wouldn't feel threatened. "Emma," she said so quietly he almost didn't hear it over the rain. "Emma, that's a beautiful name." "My daughter's middle name is Emma," Jonathan said, moving slowly to cover her with his umbrella. "Listen, Emma, no child should have to eat from the garbage. Would you let me buy you a proper dinner? There's a diner right across the street, and they have the best chicken soup in Chicago." Emma looked at him with wide, frightened eyes, not sure if she could trust this stranger. Her stepfather had told her never to go with strangers, but he had also forced her to eat garbage. So she didn't know what was right anymore. Jonathan seemed to understand her fear because he pulled out his phone and showed her a picture. "This is my daughter Sarah. She's 12 now and lives with her mom in California. I would never hurt a child, Emma. I just want to help you get some real food." Something in his eyes made Emma believe him. Maybe it was the sadness she saw there that matched her own, or maybe it was just that she was so desperate for kindness that she was willing to take the risk. She nodded slowly, and Jonathan led her across the street to Mel's Diner, a bright, warm place that smelled like coffee and bacon. The waitress, named Betty, was a grandmother type who immediately brought towels to dry Emma off and wrapped her in a blanket from the back room. Jonathan ordered chicken soup and grilled cheese for Emma and coffee for himself, then sat quietly while she ate, trying not to stare at how hungrily she devoured the food. When she had finished eating and some color had returned to her cheeks, Jonathan gently asked her to tell him about her situation. Through tears and hiccups, Emma told him everything about her mother dying and Marcus hurting her and making her find food in the garbage. She showed him the bruises on her arms where Marcus had grabbed her and told him about the nights she slept outside when he locked her out. By the time she finished talking, Jonathan's hands were clenched into fists under the table and he was struggling to control his anger. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," Jonathan said, leaning forward. "What your stepfather is doing is wrong and illegal. No adult should ever treat a child this way. You deserve to be safe and loved and fed proper meals every day. I want to help you, but I need you to trust me. Will you let me call someone who can make sure you're safe?" Emma started crying again, but nodded because she was so tired of being afraid all the time. Jonathan called his lawyer Robert Chen, who despite the late hour immediately contacted Child Protective Services and the police. Within an hour, police officers and a social worker arrived at the diner. Emma was scared, but Jonathan stayed with her, holding her hand while she told her story again to the authorities. The social worker, a kind woman named Patricia Williams, assured Emma that she would not have to go back to Marcus tonight or ever again if they could help it. The police went to the apartment to arrest Marcus and found him passed out drunk, surrounded by empty bottles and evidence of child neglect everywhere. The refrigerator was empty except for beer, and there was no food in the cupboards. Emma's room was a mattress on the floor, in a closet with no heat and barely any blankets. They also found Emma's mother's death certificate and insurance papers showing that Marcus had received $50,000 after Rebecca's death, but there was no money left and no provisions made for Emma's care. Marcus was arrested on charges of child abuse, child neglect, and endangerment. When he woke up in the jail cell the next morning, he started screaming about his rights and demanding to know where Emma was, but nobody had any sympathy for him. Meanwhile, Emma had spent the night in an emergency foster home, but Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about her. He had barely slept, remembering the look in her eyes when she was digging through that dumpster and the way she had flinched when he first approached her. The next morning, he called Robert and said something that surprised even himself. "I want to become Emma's foster parent and eventually adopt her if possible. I know it's crazy, but I can't let that little girl go into the system when I have the means to give her everything she needs." Robert warned him it would be a long and difficult process, especially as a single man, but Jonathan was determined. He had failed his own daughter by letting work consume him during his marriage, and he saw this as a chance to do better, to be the father Emma deserved. The legal process took several months, during which Jonathan visited Emma every day at her temporary foster home. He brought her books and toys and clothes, and most importantly, he brought consistency and kindness. Emma was slow to trust at first, having learned that adults could hurt you even when they promised not to. But Jonathan was patient, never pushing her to accept him faster than she was ready. He would sit and read to her for hours, or help her with homework, or just listen when she wanted to talk about her mother. Slowly, Emma began to open up, telling him about her dreams of becoming a teacher and her love of butterflies, and how her mother used to call her little butterfly because she was always fluttering around. The court hearings were difficult, especially when Marcus tried to fight for custody from jail, claiming his rights as her legal guardian. But the evidence against him was overwhelming, and several neighbors finally came forward to testify about the abuse they had witnessed. Mrs. Chen from downstairs told the judge about the nights she heard Emma crying and begging to be let inside. Mr. Wilson from across the hall described seeing Emma with black eyes and bruises that Marcus claimed were from falling down. The teacher from Emma's school, Miss Anderson, presented records showing that Emma often came to school hungry and dirty and had missed many days when her injuries were too visible. Jonathan also had to prove he could provide a stable home for Emma, which meant opening his life to scrutiny from social workers and court officials. They interviewed his employees, his friends, and even his ex-wife Margaret, who surprisingly gave a glowing recommendation. "Jonathan made mistakes in our marriage by prioritizing work, but he was always a loving father," she told the social worker. "I believe he's learned from those mistakes, and Emma would be lucky to have him." Sarah, his daughter, also wrote a letter to the judge saying she would love to have Emma as a sister and couldn't wait to meet her when she visited for summer vacation. Finally, after 6 long months, the judge made her decision. Marcus's parental rights were permanently terminated, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for child abuse. Jonathan was granted full custody of Emma, with the adoption to be finalized after a trial period of 1 year. When the judge announced her decision, Emma ran into Jonathan's arms, crying happy tears for the first time since her mother had died. "Can I call you Dad?" she whispered into his shoulder, and Jonathan had to wipe his own eyes before answering, "Nothing would make me happier, little butterfly." The day Emma moved into Jonathan's house was like something from a fairy tale for her. He had prepared a beautiful room painted in her favorite color, purple, with butterfly decorations everywhere and more books than she had ever seen. There was a closet full of new clothes and shoes that actually fit, and a desk for doing homework, and a bed so soft she felt like she was sleeping on a cloud. But the best part was the kitchen, always full of food, and the dinner table where they ate together every night, talking about their days. Jonathan had rearranged his entire work scheduled to be home by 6 every evening, and he never missed a school event or parent-teacher conference. Emma thrived in her new life, gaining weight and growing taller and smiling more every day. She made friends at her new school and joined the choir and started taking piano lessons. Jonathan learned to braid her hair, though he was terrible at it at first, and they developed their own bedtime ritual where he would tell her stories about Brave princesses named Emma, who saved kingdoms with their kindness. On the one-year anniversary of the day, they met Jonathan through a party to celebrate the finalization of the adoption. Sarah flew in from California, and the two girls bonded instantly, becoming the sisters they were meant to be. At the party, Emma stood up to make a speech that brought everyone to tears. "A year ago, I was alone and scared and hungry, digging through garbage just trying to survive. I thought nobody cared about me, and that I would never be happy again. But then Dad found me, and he didn't just give me food that night, he gave me hope. He showed me that there are good people in the world who will stand up for children who can't protect themselves. He taught me that I deserve love and respect and dreams for my future. Dad, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved, and I love you more than all the butterflies in the whole world." Years later, Emma did become a teacher, just like she had dreamed, specializing in helping children from difficult backgrounds. She started a foundation called Butterfly Wings that provided emergency housing and support for abused children and their protective parents. Jonathan was her biggest supporter, donating millions to the cause and serving on the board of directors. At her wedding to a wonderful man named David, who treated her like a queen, Jonathan walked her down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. In his speech at the reception, he said, "The night I found Emma, I thought I was saving her, but the truth is, she saved me. She taught me what really matters in life, not money or success, but love and family, and using whatever gifts we have to help others." Marcus died in prison 3 years into his sentence from liver failure caused by years of alcohol abuse. Emma chose not to attend his funeral, but she did visit her mother's grave to tell her that she was safe and happy and loved. She left a butterfly pin on the headstone, the same one Jonathan had given her on their first Christmas together, and whispered, "Thank you, Mama, for watching over me and sending Dad to find me that night." She knew that somewhere her mother was smiling, knowing that her little butterfly had finally found her wings. The story of Emma and Jonathan became well known in Chicago, inspiring others to become foster parents and to speak up when they saw children being abused. The alley behind Antonio's restaurant where they first met now has a small plaque that reads, "Sometimes angels come in the rain to save us when we need it most." Betty from the diner started a program where any child who was hungry could come in for a free meal, no questions asked. The community that had once turned away from Emma's suffering came together to make sure no child would ever have to eat from garbage again. This story, titled "Little Girl Sobbed as Stepfather Forced Her to Beg Garbage for Dinner Until Millionaire, Saw and ... reminds us that one person choosing to act with compassion can change everything. Jonathan could have walked past that night, could have assumed it wasn't his problem, could have gotten in his expensive car and driven away. But he stopped, and he acted, and he saved a life. Emma could have given up, could have let the darkness swallow her, could have become another tragic statistic. But she held on to hope even in her darkest moment, and that hope was rewarded with a love greater than she had ever imagined. We all have the power to be someone's Jonathan, to notice suffering and choose to help rather than look away. And we all have Emma's strength inside us to survive our darkest moments and trust that better days are coming. Love isn't always about blood or birth certificates. Sometimes it's about choosing to show up for someone who needs you and refusing to let them face their demons alone. Every child deserves to be safe and fed and loved, and sometimes it takes a stranger becoming family to make that happen. The garbage that Emma was forced to eat from became the place where her new life began because someone cared enough to stop and say, "This is wrong, and I will not let it continue." Today, Emma and Jonathan continue their work with Butterfly Wings, having helped thousands of children escape abuse and find loving homes. They speak at conferences and schools, sharing their story to inspire others and to educate people about the signs of child abuse. Emma always ends her speeches with these words: "If you see something, say something. If a child needs help, be there. Help." You might think you're not qualified or it's not your place, but sometimes all it takes is one person saying, "I see you, and you matter, and I will not let you suffer alone." Be that person, because you might be the miracle that child has been praying for.